So if you haven't heard by now, The Last of Us Multiplayer, or The Last of Us Factions 2, whatever you really want to call it, is in sort of a rocky situation. At least according to Jason Schreier and Bloomberg, who released an article talking about Naughty Dog and their recent struggles with The Last of Us Multiplayer. The article mentioned things like they are taking multiple developers off of the project and moving them over to a separate single-player project that Naughty Dog is also developing. It also says that the reason they are doing that is because Bungie, which is now owned by PlayStation, they were asked to come in and evaluate the game that Naughty Dog has built so far. And apparently what Bungie said was that they don't see how this game is going to keep players engaged in the long run. Depending on who you are, you might severely disagree with what Bungie is saying there. As long as it is something even remotely similar to the first Factions title, which still has a pretty significant player base to this day, I don't think fans would be disappointed. As well as in this article, Jason Schreier hints that maybe this game could be on the brink of cancellation altogether. Now, besides this, there's been other news, like insider Jeff Grubb was also asked because The Last of Us Multiplayer didn't show up at the PlayStation Showcase like a lot of us thought it would, to which Jeff Grubb responded, "All I have heard about this game is that it looks a lot like a studio's first live service game, and that Naughty Dog wanted to do things its way, which maybe didn't bode well for Factions." He then also added, earlier this year they planned to put it in this showcase, at that time it was having problems. I want to talk about that first statement where he said that it looks like a studio's first live service game. I mean, just to keep it plain and simple, that kind of sounds like whoever made that original statement is saying that it doesn't look that good. It honestly sounds like they're trying to say that it looks bad without actually trying to hurt anybody's feelings. Like, oh yeah, I mean, it looks like a studio's first live service game. Yo, Jerry, get a load of this piece of shit. But then you combine that with the second part of this, where he says that Naughty Dog wanted to do things its way, which didn't bode well for Factions. So what does that mean? I think that means, like Naughty Dog has told us multiple times, they want to interweave this multiplayer game with a sort of story element, which makes sense why they would want to do that. That's Naughty Dog's bread and butter, is single player story, narrative driven experiences. But it sounds like that is presenting some sort of development problem for a live service like title over at the studio. And then when you combine all of that with the second statement Jeff Grubb leaves, saying that at that time, earlier in the year, the game was having problems. Now, obviously, there's no way to tell if the problems that the game was having back then are the same problems that we're hearing about right now, or if they're completely different altogether. Either way, all of this sounds very, very worrying, at least until you dive into it a little bit deeper. Amidst all of this craziness that was happening on Twitter, Naughty Dog wanted to try and get out ahead of the article that was going to be released by Bloomberg, and they released this statement here. "We know many of you have been looking forward to hearing more about our The Last of Us multiplayer game. We're incredibly proud of the job our studio has done thus far, but as development has continued, we've realized what is best for the game is to give it more time. Our team will continue to work on the project as well as our other games in development, including a brand new single player experience. We look forward to sharing more soon." Now, with this statement that Naughty Dog put out, it kind of casts more of a hopeful energy coming from this game, saying that merely it's just delayed, not canceled. Now, even with that being said, I'm sure there are going to be some people that just take this at face value and listen to what Naughty Dog says here, but there are also going to be those that are trying to insist that they're just steering the conversation in a more positive way until they can make the official announcement of the cancellation of this project. Now, if you ask me, I'm going to choose to take this at face value and believe what Naughty Dog is telling us in this statement. Simply because if you look at this game has been in development for a long time, about 4+ years, if anything. They have been planning this since before Last of Us Part 2 even came out, and they announced before the game came out that they would have to separate Part 2 and this multiplayer project because it was getting too ambitious. In my mind, you don't spend this much time on a title and then just when you're probably, if I had to guess, a year or maybe a year and a half out, decide to cancel it. And obviously that is not a universal ideology. I'm sure there are other games out there that have been canceled very shortly before they are supposed to release. Naughty Dog, as well as almost every other first-party PlayStation studio, doesn't have a history of doing anything like that. But also, you couple everything that I just said with these statements from actual employees at Naughty Dog after all of this news has come out. Paul Bishai was asked on Twitter, "Hope everything everything is okay with you in your position and your multiplayer project. He responded, "Everything is great, thank you. Still working hard on multiplayer with a talented team." Or Del Walker, who is a senior character artist over at Naughty Dog, quote tweeted Naughty Dog's statement on all of this and said, "Let us cook." And then lastly, at least of the ones that I could find, you have Samuel Prince, who is a lead editor at Naughty Dog, quote tweeted Naughty Dog's statement saying, "I can assure you it smells great in this kitchen." Now, of course, someone who's working on a project is not going to try to steer you away from that project. They're going to want to try to bring you into it any way they can. But I'm sure these three people were not asked by Naughty Dog to make some sort of statement about the game. They just genuinely feel a sort of pride talking about it and what they've done with the project. As well as that, Naughty Dog has a proven track record with all of us. Granted, more with single player than multiplayer, but a track record nonetheless. Depending on who you are, The Last of Us Part 2 might have put a dent in that track record for you. Me personally, it didn't. Even then, we're talking about the multiplayer project, which is the sequel to Last of Us Factions, which is pretty universally loved unless you just haven't played it. But I don't think we need to worry. I don't think there is a legitimate risk that this is going to be canceled. Sure, they might have taken a couple of developers off the project and moved them over to their single player project. But the way I might see that is the single player project is much earlier on than the multiplayer project. They might need more help over on the single player project, getting more people to character design, all that sort of thing. Whereas the multiplayer project is a lot closer to the end, so they can afford to lose maybe just a few developers so they can refocus and get anything done that needs to get done on it. Now, as for whether we're going to see this actual multiplayer project revealed this year like they said that we would,
and you're going to see a lot more of this game come next year.
Next year. So I wait till next year to hear more about that one.
I'm not sure, but if I were a betting man, I would say yes. I don't think it's going to show up this coming week at Summer Games Fest at the time of recording, but there are already rumors about a second PlayStation Showcase potentially happening later this year with even more stuff to show. If that ends up being the case, I think that'll be around September time. And if there even isn't a PlayStation Showcase, we still have in September The Last of Us Day, which happens every year. And this year is going to be the 10-year anniversary of the release of The Last of Us. So maybe they would want to showcase something about the multiplayer project there. Well, actually, the first Last of Us game came out in June, so it's actually very soon. We're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of the game, so it could show up at Summer Games Fest, but judging by how close this statement that Naughty Dog released is to the actual Summer Games Fest showcase, I don't think that we will see anything about it there. We just have to let Naughty Dog cook. We gotta trust them and trust their process and trust that they know what they're doing. And maybe not listen to Bungie so much, but obviously PlayStation hired Bungie for a reason. Bungie is going to be those people that come in and talk to the different studios about the way that they are going about these live service games. Either way, I think we're gonna be fed with this game regardless when it drops. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day.